I cut down a mature tree and I plant a new one. Chop the old one into logs, and those logs will heat my home for the next 10 years. By that time, the new one I planted is now large enough to chop down, etc., etc. Then I could be classed as having renewable energy and being carbon neutral. The new one that grew absorbed all the CO2 that I released when I burned the logs. If, however, the logs only heat my home for a single year, then it is most definitely not renewable and definitely not carbon neutral. And if I don't bother planting a new one each time I cut one down, or waiting the 10 years and planting a new one each year, then that's just the destruction of the flora of the planet. If I tell outright lies about it, then that should be an imprisonable offence for somebody. Welcome to Drax Biofuel Power Station. I'm Dave. This is Dave Takes It On. Well, we enter the murky world of renewable biofuels. And the reason why I'm terrified that one day this or some government will allow one of these forms of hydrogen to be allowed or accepted, and that will open the floodgates for the oil giants to exploit the UK population once again. But I get ahead of myself. Drax. Well, Drax was once the largest coal-fired power station in the UK. It was planned to shut down in 2021. Coal reached the end of its life, but it was then extended to September 22, then given a further 6-month extension to 2023 before finally stopping in April 2023. This was ahead of a government total ban on coal, which comes into force in 2025. It is capable at the moment of providing 2.7 gigawatts of power, making it the largest power station in the UK. Now, in comparison, Dogger Bank Wind Farm, once complete, will offer 3.6 gigawatts, much more. Hornsea is currently the largest, complete with 1.32 gigawatts. Well, in total, the UK has 2,695 offshore turbines with total capacity of 14.7 gigawatts, or nearly 6 Drax power stations. More are being built all the time. These have little aesthetic impact on the UK. Most people can't even see them. Back to Drax, it was converted from coal to burn biomass. Not all the burners have been converted, about 4 of the 6. Biomass, by definition, is organic materials from plants and animals that can be burned to generate electricity. These include wood, agricultural waste, and animal manure. Well, it's come as no surprise that some materials burn better than others. They will produce more heat, less waste. Classic example of this is common knowledge for anyone who's got a wood burner or a pellet burning stove. The modern versions of these burn the logs or pellets down to leave just a fine dust that you can just hoover up easily, but they emit massive amounts of heat. Although they're dearer than collecting your own wood, they are convenient and much more efficient. It's no surprise that power stations prefer the efficiency of pellets to anything else. Well, especially when Drax Power Station is actually owned by a company which also owns pellet manufacturing facilities in the US and Canada. The plot thickens, just like unstirred porridge. We seem, well, or at least Drax seems, to get confused between biomass, biofuels, renewable sustained forest, and primary forests, plus forests that they cut down and those that others cut down. See, they're supposed to only use sustainable forests as a source and disclose those that they themselves cut down. But they seem very conveniently to forget those that they don't cut down themselves, but buy from others that have cut down them. They also happily buy from those that chop down primary non-sustainable forests by claiming, well, we don't cut down any primary forests themselves. Smoke and mirrors. Or, well, just plain lies. Not for the first time either. They got fined 25 million, for example, in 2020-2021 for doing just that when they got caught out by Ofgem. It was just in 2024 that Ofgem, well, they forgot to investigate them, and it took the BBC to track it down and find out. But once caught, they at least did the decent thing. They promised to, quote, focus on implementing the lessons learned, end quote. Drax has received billions of pounds in subsidies from government, and bill payers because burning wood pellets is classed as renewable energy. Renewable energy? Who classed that one? Wood pellets should never be classed as renewable energy, simply because the fuel's not free, and in the quantities we use, it's not even renewable. We cut down far more than we plant and allow to grow to maturity. Wood pellets are simply a fuel that must be manufactured and transported usually huge distances that in itself produces CO2. The forests concerned that supply the raw materials are supposed to be renewable, but we use at such a rate that we've long since moved on to non-renewable and now recently protected forests that are never normally logged and have billions of tonnes of CO2 locked up for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, and provide natural habitats for wildlife. Drax, when asked for a statement, stated it no longer owns such forests and has not cut down and sourced wood from sites where British Columbia government has asked them to stop. Big deal. However, it has been discovered, still happily buys and burns wood pellets from those forests when it's being cut down and supplied by other companies. A number of issues seem to apply here. First of all, why are we paying billions in subsidies for shipping and burning Canadian and American forests in the UK? What the hell use is Ofgem if it has caught them doing this in a previous year, maybe for several years, but totally failed to spot this last year? Surely it should have been absolute top priority in 2024, number one target. Instead, well, it missed it. Well, just like Ofwat missed the 3.6 million hours of illegal dumping of raw sewage into rivers and seas in 2024. Well, to me, it would be pretty hard to miss. So what on earth is Ofgem doing? It's claimed to work to protect our rights as users of electricity, but if that's the case, it's doing a pretty poor job of it. I, for one, don't feel particularly well protected. Well, it seems the government, although embarrassingly slow, has actually eventually realised the error of their ways. In a late move, they've now agreed to halve the subsidies. Oh, wow. Halve burning wood. They're going to still pay them just half the amount. Oh yeah, and that won't commence until 2027, so another 2 years of subsidies to enjoy. And apparently there's some plans to capture the carbon that Drax emits. Yeah, like I believe that one. Drax, of course, claims it's already carbon neutral because it plants new trees for every one it burns. But of course, that only applies if it plants new ones. Not only new ones, but keeps planting enough of them each and every year until the first of them reach maturity. It's no good cutting down 1 million and planting 1 million. That just doesn't work. In addition, it's proposed to only use Drax now as a backup to renewables. So if there is plenty of renewables about, it won't even run at all. I'll believe that when I see it. Don't we shut down wind farms when there's too much wind? Anyway, subsidies could drop from the current 1 billion a year to 470 million. Yeah. There'll also be a clawback arrangement to prevent Drax from making excess profits. Excess profits? What about profits? If the price of electricity rises too much. Finally, the government wants an agreement that only sustainable wood pellets must be used. Well, I suppose something's better than nothing. I do take my hat off to Labour. The previous government ruled in a time when these offences were rife and did absolutely nothing apart from paying them the subsidies. Labour has been in power just mere months, and movement is actually happening. Not enough, not fast enough, but they had more than 14 years, the last lot. Did nothing. This lot, well, encouraging signs. Well, since Drax operates to make a profit, the penalty for any future infringement must be financial in the first instance. It makes apparently around about $1 billion a year, so a paltry 25 million fine is peanuts. Gets billions in subsidies, so 25 million fine again, considerably less than peanuts. It's time this or any government realised it holds all the cards. Drax owns the power station. It can only ever make any money and profit if it's allowed to run it. If the government discovers an MP, for example, breaking the rules, there follows usually a suspension while investigating. So here, for a serious blatant infringement, the very first step must be instantly order it shut down pending an inquiry. order the bosses into Westminster to sit down and explain exactly what happened. We got the capacity in the grid to cover, it only makes less than 5% of our electricity. Sometimes it's shut down altogether, so we can easily cope during such an inquiry. If the government doesn't have the power to do this, it needs to get an immediate emergency session of Parliament to grant it such a power. We can't have private companies grabbing billions in subsidies under clearly fraudulent circumstances. That applies to the water industry as well. The government then needs to instantly call in Jonathan Brearley, he's the head of Ofgem, and demand he explains how Ofgem missed this breach and what he will do to make sure it doesn't happen again. Heads must roll. By the way, same should apply to the head of Ofwat and the bosses of Thames Water. See, this, and particularly previous governments, often seem to believe that having sold off the various utilities, like the National Grid, and the water and the railways, that they just run themselves. Well, they clearly don't. In each case, there must be in place a mechanism for some sort of government control. There must be a provision for what happens if the grid or the water companies just one day say, oh, that's it, had enough, just sell up, cash in, and they disappear. Well, at least I sincerely hope they have. See, with electricity generation, there must be an overall control whereby if the national grid, owned by a private equity or investment fund, simply fails to add sufficient capacity in a timely manner to meet present and future needs, that the government has a clause that says they can step in and say, sorry, you've just failed, you're out, we're back in charge. Or in the words of another more famous than I, you're fired. Anyway, renewable generation of electricity is not a dream, it is a necessity. It's also the easiest, cheapest form of energy we have. A solar panel will sit up there in the sunlight and pour out free electricity. A wind turbine stands out there in the wind and turns a set of blades that turns a generator that pours out free electricity. Nothing is simpler. Nothing is cheaper. The electricity they produce is free. Yeah, of course, there's servicing, maintenance, repairs and replacements, but that applies to all commercial generation sources. But ask your neighbour with solar PV how much he or she pays for their panel servicing, and you'll get a blank stare. Servicing? I haven't touched them. Renewable generation simply uses a fuel that is totally free of charge and totally carbon free. That is why biofuels and biomass should never be classed as renewable. Their fuels are neither free nor carbon neutral. Now, I touched on hydrogen. I'm actually a huge supporter of hydrogen. Not yet, nowhere near yet, and definitely not in the hands of the oil giants. To get a renewable grid by 2030, that's a stated Labour target, and it's a fantastic one to aim for. It has been calculated that we need a grid that produces twice what we need. It also needs masses of battery and pumped hydro storage, plenty of interconnectors to the continent for the days when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. It also needs its own virtual grid of EVs, all operating vehicle to grid, V2G. With an average battery in an EV of 50 kilowatt hours and using a spare capacity of say 20 kilowatt hours to trade, then 30 million cars all plugged into the grid together will represent a capacity of 600 gigawatt hours. That's approaching half the UK daily capacity. Not draining it, supplying it. Just from the EVs if ever it was needed. But of course, most days there's going to be far more produced than needed. Our EVs would become our emergency standby grid connected battery. And in a real emergency, we could produce an awful lot more. On the obverse side, that will inevitably mean that on the days when the wind does blow and the sun does shine and the batteries are already full and the reservoirs are all fully pumped up and the continent is also fully topped up and the EVs are already all full, that we will still have an excess of electricity, far more than we need. On those occasions, the obvious answer is not to waste it, not to turn the wind farms off, but to use it to produce green, properly green hydrogen. Turn it into hydrogen, store that for the days when the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine. Just an additional grid fuel that would otherwise go to waste. Forget the efficiency. If it's absolutely going to waste otherwise, just use it. My fear is that once you let a single oil giant make any colour hydrogen other than green, it's a slippery slope to them drilling the world for natural gas, which is almost pure methane, and then making grey hydrogen, which process is a huge producer of CO2. Green hydrogen is a zero CO2 emitter. Oh, by the way, did you know there is now green hydrogen as well as grey, blue, black, brown, pink, turquoise, yellow and white? They're designed specifically to confuse you so that the oil giants can drill for as much natural gas as they can find, turn it into hydrogen and sell it to the gullible public as clean hydrogen when it's anything but. There is only one hydrogen, it's green. It's made from true renewable energy via electrolysis, and the entire process, including compressing it, liquefying it, and storing it, are all completed using true renewable energy that is completely surplus to requirements. I'm Dave, and thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, click the like button. If you'd like to see more, please click subscribe. Thanks very much, as always, to our Patreon members. Without your support, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. And for those who'd like to find out more, details of Patreon is down below. There's lots of goodies on offer for you. I'm Dave.